Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening.
Jackson stared out at the sprawling expanse of his estate. Nestled deep within the Xylos mountain range, the manor was a monument to his success, a success he increasingly felt was hollow. The biting wind howled outside, a symphony of desolation that mirrored his own inner turmoil. He sipped his scent whiskey, the amber liquid doing little to warm the chill that had settled deep in his bones. He was alone, as he preferred, the silence broken only by the hum of the automated systems that kept his opulent prison running. Suddenly, a piercing alarm shattered the quiet. Jackson frowned, his brow furrowing as he tapped the comm on his wrist. "Report. Sir, we have an unregistered vessel approaching the perimeter." "It's distressed," replied the calm, mechanical voice of the security AI, Athos. "Distressed? What kind of vessel?" Jackson asked, his interest piqued despite his best efforts. "Unknown origin, sir. Scans indicate heavy damage. It appears to be crash-landing within the estate boundaries." Jackson felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in years, curiosity. "Override lockdown. I want to see this." He strode towards the main entrance, the automated doors hissing open as he approached. Outside, the storm raged, but through the swirling snow, he saw it, a mangled spacecraft, half buried in the icy ground. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen, its design alien and brutally functional. As he approached, the mangled hatch hissed open, revealing a figure staggering out. She was tall, with skin of deep violet that shimmered in the dim light. Her silver hair was matted with ice, and her eyes, a striking shade of amber, were wide with fear and desperation. Clutched in her arms were two small children, their faces pale against her vibrant skin. "Please," she gasped, her voice hoarse and strained. "You have to help us. They're coming." Jackson, a man who had built his empire on logic and calculated decisions, found himself acting on instinct. He reached out, supporting the woman as she swayed, her strength clearly failing. "Get them inside," he barked, his voice cutting through the storm. The automated systems responded instantly, deploying a sheltered pathway towards the manor. As they moved, the woman, who he now saw was an alien he had never seen, whispered something to the children in a language he didn't understand, but the urgency in her tone was clear. Inside the manor, the warmth was a stark contrast to the frigid conditions outside. Jackson led them to a sitting area, his mind racing to process the situation. An alien woman, two children, a crashed spacecraft, and the ominous, "They're coming." It was the kind of scenario he usually only encountered in the archaic sci-fi vids he occasionally indulged in. "My name is Lyra," the woman said, her voice regaining some strength. "And these are my children, Kale and Alina." The children, a boy and a girl, huddled close to their mother, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder as they took in their surroundings. "Jackson," he replied, offering a curt nod. "Jackson Rourke." "What's going on, Lyra? Who's coming?" Lyra hesitated, her gaze flickering towards the windows, as if expecting an attack at any moment. "I can't tell you everything," she said finally. "Not yet. But please, you have to believe me, my family is in danger. We need sanctuary." "Sanctuary?" Jackson scoffed, his skepticism returning. "I'm a tech mogul, not a galactic innkeeper. Why should I help you?" Lyra's expression hardened. "Because if they find us, they won't stop at just my family. What they're after could threaten this entire world." Jackson studied her, searching for any sign of deception. He saw only fear, desperation, and a fierce determination to protect her children. Against his better judgment, he found himself relenting. "Fine," he said, his voice grudging. "I'll give you sanctuary. But you're going to tell me everything. No secrets." Lyra nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Jackson. You won't regret this." As the automated systems began to provide medical care and nourishment to Lyra and her children, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that he had just opened a door to something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. He had always lived a life of careful control, but now, his carefully constructed world was about to be thrown into chaos. The whispers of Xylos seemed to carry a warning, a sense of impending doom that settled heavy in his heart. He watched Lyra and her children, wondering what secrets they held and what price he would pay for offering them shelter. The storm outside raged on, a fitting backdrop to the storm that was brewing within the walls of his secluded estate. He was no longer alone, but he wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. The night was young, and the mysteries of Lyra and her pursuers were only just beginning to unfold. Jackson knew one thing for sure: his life would never be the same again. The days that followed Lyra's arrival were a blur of unease and suspicion for Jackson. He had given her and her children a suite in the west wing of the manor, a decision that was met with thinly veiled disapproval from his staff. Mrs. Gable, his longtime housekeeper, was particularly frosty, her usual efficiency replaced with a tense formality whenever Lyra was near. "Mr. Rourke," she said one morning, her voice tight, "are you certain about this? We know nothing about these people." Jackson sighed. "They needed help, Mrs. Gable. That's all there is to it. But they're different. And the stories about her ship, the lights in the sky, people are talking." He understood her concern. Xylos was a relatively quiet planet, and the arrival of a crashed alien spacecraft was bound to stir up gossip. But he wouldn't turn them out. Not yet. Meanwhile, Lyra remained guarded, offering only snippets of information about her past. She spoke of a war, a fallen civilization, and a relentless enemy that sought to exploit her people's knowledge. But she never revealed the full story, always stopping short of the details that Jackson craved. One evening, as Jackson was working in his study, Athos alerted him to an unexpected visitor. "Detective Ryland is here to see you, sir." "Ryland?" Jackson frowned. He hadn't had any dealings with the local authorities in years. "Send him in." Detective Ryland was a tall, wiry man with a sharp gaze and an air of quiet determination. He entered the study, his eyes taking in the opulent surroundings with a hint of disdain. "Mr. Rourke," he said, extending a hand. "Detective Ryland, Xylos Central Precinct. I'm investigating a reported spacecraft crash on your property." Jackson shook his hand, his mind racing. "I was just about to report that myself, Detective. It happened last night during the storm. I haven't had a chance to contact the authorities yet." Ryland raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? And who was piloting this spacecraft?" "A traveler," Jackson replied, carefully choosing his words. "She and her children were injured in the crash. I'm providing them with shelter until they can be properly rescued." Ryland's eyes narrowed. "A traveler, you say? From off-world?" Jackson hesitated. He knew he couldn't lie outright, but he didn't want to reveal too much either. "Yes, Detective. She's an Ethian." Ryland's expression didn't change, but Jackson could sense his interest piqued. "An Ethian. That's quite a story, Mr. Rourke. I'll need to speak with her, of course." "Of course," Jackson agreed. "But she's still recovering. I'll let you know when she's up to it." Ryland nodded, his gaze lingering on Jackson's face. "I appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Rourke. But I have to warn you, we take these matters very seriously. If there's anything you're not telling me, it's in your best interest to come clean now." After Ryland left, Jackson felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. The detective's visit had been more than just a routine inquiry. He suspected that Ryland was onto something, that he knew more than he let on. He found Lyra in the garden, watching her children play in the snow. He told her about Ryland's visit, and her face paled. "He knows," she whispered, her voice filled with dread. "They're getting closer." "Who, Lyra? Who's after you?" Jackson demanded, his patience wearing thin. Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. "It's a syndicate," she said finally. "A powerful organization that controls vast swathes of the galaxy. My husband, he stole something from them. Something they want back." "What did he steal?" "Information," Lyra replied. "Information that could expose their crimes and bring them down. They won't stop until they get it back. And they won't care who they hurt in the process." Jackson stared at her, realizing the gravity of the situation. He had unwittingly become entangled in a dangerous game, one with stakes far higher than he could have ever imagined. He looked at Kale and Alina, their innocent faces oblivious to the danger that surrounded them. He knew he couldn't abandon them. He had made a choice to protect them, and he would see it through, no matter the cost. As darkness fell, an uneasy calm settled over the estate. But Jackson knew it wouldn't last. The shadows were closing in, and the sanctuary he had provided was about to be shattered. The price of protecting Lyra and her children was about to be paid, and he braced himself for the storm that was yet to come. The lavish comforts of Jackson's estate offered little solace. The opulent surroundings felt like a gilded cage, trapping Lyra and her children in a false sense of security. Jackson, despite his gruff exterior, proved to be a surprisingly attentive host. He ensured their needs were met, provided them with entertainment, and even attempted to engage Kale and Alina in conversation, though the children remained withdrawn and wary. One afternoon, as Lyra was teaching Kale and Alina their native Ethian script in the Manor's library, Athos, the security AI, issued a stark warning: intrusion detected. Multiple hostiles approaching the perimeter. Lyra's heart leaped into her throat. "How many?" "Approximately a dozen, heavily armed. They've disabled the outer defenses. I recommend immediate evacuation." Jackson, who had been reviewing security protocols in his study, rushed into the library, his face grim. "We have to move. Now." He led them to a hidden panic room beneath the manor, a reinforced bunker stocked with supplies and communication equipment. "Athos, seal the entrances and activate the emergency defenses." As the heavy steel doors slammed shut, the sound of gunfire echoed from above. The intruders had breached the manor. Lyra clutched her children close, her mind racing. They had found her. The syndicate had found her. "Who are they, Lyra?" Jackson demanded, his voice tight with urgency. "Tell me everything." Lyra took a deep breath, steeling herself. "They're part of the KRYLL syndicate. An intergalactic crime organization. My husband, before he died, was investigating their operations. He uncovered evidence of their illegal activities: smuggling, extortion, slavery. He was going to expose them. And they killed him for it?" "Yes. But before he died, he hid the evidence. He entrusted it to me. That's why they're after me. They think I know where it is." The sound of explosions shook the bunker. The intruders were using heavy explosives to try and breach the defenses. "We can't stay here," Jackson said. "This place won't hold for long." Athos chimed in. "I've identified a secondary escape route. An underground tunnel leading to a nearby abandoned mining complex." "Can we reach it?" Jackson asked. "It's our only chance," Lyra said. Jackson activated the tunnel entrance, a hidden door behind a bookshelf. He armed himself with a plasma rifle from the bunker's armory and led the way, Lyra and the children close behind. The tunnel was dark and damp, the air thick with the smell of mildew. They moved quickly, guided by Athos's internal mapping system. As they navigated the narrow passages, they could hear the intruders above, their voices growing louder as they closed in. Suddenly, the tunnel ahead collapsed, blocking their path. "Dead end," Jackson said, his voice grim. "There's another way," Lyra said, pointing to a narrow crevice in the wall. "A hidden passage. It's dangerous, but it might be our only hope. Jackson nodded. Lead the way. Lyra squeezed through the crevice, followed by Kale and Alina. Jackson brought up the rear, covering their retreat. The passage was narrow and treacherous, forcing them to crawl on their hands and knees. As they emerged from the passage, they found themselves in a vast underground cavern. The air was cool and damp, and the only light came from bioluminescent fungi that clung to the walls. Where are we? Jackson asked. This is part of an ancient Ethian city, Lyra said, her voice filled with awe. It was abandoned centuries ago, but some of the tunnels still connect to the surface. As they ventured deeper into the cavern, they heard a noise, a rhythmic tapping sound. Someone's here, Jackson whispered. Stay close. He raised his rifle, ready for a fight. As they rounded a corner, they saw a group of figures huddled around a makeshift campfire. They were dressed in ragged clothing, their faces gaunt and weary. Who are you? Jackson demanded. One of the figures stepped forward. We are the remnants, he said, his voice raspy. We seek refuge from the world above. Lyra gasped. You're Ethian. Yes, the figure replied. We have been hiding here for generations, waiting for the day when we can reclaim our home. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. We need your help, she said. We're being hunted by the KRYLL Syndicate. The figure's expression hardened. The Syndicate. They are our enemy as well. We will help you. But know this, taking refuge with us is a dangerous choice. The Syndicate's reach is long, and they will stop at nothing to achieve their goals. Jackson looked at Lyra, then at Kale and Alina. He knew the risks, but he also knew that they had nowhere else to go. We have no choice, he said. We're with you. The remnants nodded, their faces grim but determined. They led Jackson, Lyra, and her children deeper into the underground city, into the shadows where they hoped to find sanctuary from the relentless pursuit of the KRYLL Syndicate. Their flight had led them to the hidden heart of Xylos, a place where the past and the present collided, and where the fate of Lyra's family, and perhaps the entire galaxy, would be decided.